I'm here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I came upon this little spot where we have this little amphitheater. And there's this little plaque over there that tells about the story of the small stones and how stones thrown into a river, into water like this, are metaphorical about individuals, about cities, about developments that we create. And every time we do something like that, we create a little change in the current and change the way the world works when we throw something new. People talk about disruptive technologies. Well, there are stones in the river. Now here in Grand Rapids, apparently they lost the rapids. And I saw a plaque further on down the line talking about how they want to restore their rapids. After the Industrial Revolution, the city of Grand Rapids and the Grand Rapid River is pretty calm. So we've changed this so much that now we have no rapids in Grand Rapids. But every stone we throw into the river can help create those things. And there was another plaque down there that said they wanted to sustainably restore the rapids to Grand Rapids. And so there's different educational things about the different animals that live here and how they're trying to clean the water and that sort of thing. So it's cool to see that they're recognizing that Grand Rapids probably should have rapids. And if you don't, you got to change your branding. But I've had a great time getting to this point, and I've spent a lot of time with my family. And I come from a Christian background, and when I was younger, I guess 25 years ago or so, kind of came out to my family and said, yeah, I can't really follow that path anymore of Christianity. It doesn't resonate with me. And so over those last 25 years, I've been fairly vocal on how I feel about the church and about Christianity and religion in general. And beyond that, the world we've created with the most powerful nation in the world being built from those stones dropped into the river of civilization and the rapids they've created. And I love my family, and they find a lot of joy and purpose in that Christian tradition. So I don't argue with them about it, and even when they bring it up, I've come to the point where I don't really comment on it that much. And it's been refreshing to just listen and think about why my oldest sister finally asked me, why did I stop following Jesus? And my youngest sister, Cindy, is married to a Presbyterian minister in Paul. And they live in the Manse in Clifton Forge, and I visited with them first on this trip. And spent a couple of days in the Manse. And even though I had looked into probably 9 different thrift stores in Nashville and Asheville, I could not find a pair of boots, because men don't give away their shoes. We wear them until they fall off. So you don't find men's shoes, especially boots, in thrift stores. You find them in the garbage somewhere because they can't be worn anymore. So it was really hard to find a pair of boots to replace mine, since the sole had come off and everything. So I went to Cindy said, they got a clothes closet at their church. Sure enough, not only did I find a pair of really great boots that are steel-toed and really good for riding, but not so good for walking, I also found this great pair of Merrells, which just slip right on, and they're nice for walking around. So when I got off the bike, I just switched my shoes. Then I went to visit Dawn, my second youngest sister, and she got me a pair of flip-flops, so I have those too. So my sisters are making sure that I walk my path comfortably, whatever that may be. My oldest sister, no, actually, my least youngest sister, that's probably a better way to put it. Lori, she, we went for a walk in downtown Fort Wayne. She asked, we had a whole morning together, and so she showed me Fort Wayne, and I asked about different things, and some of them she knew, and some of them she didn't, and we found them out. So it was a lot of fun. She said it was like the most walking she'd done in quite a while, and so I was glad I had good footwear. But we stopped for coffee, and she said, Stephen, I got to ask you something. You know, what was it that made you decide to stop following Jesus? And I said, well, I never really stopped following Jesus. I'm a big fan. I really adore Jesus, but it was Christianity that I had to break paths with. And for me, I try to make things as simple as possible. And because Jesus took the 10 Commandments and just, brought them right down to only 2 commandments. Love your God with all your heart, strength, body, and soul, I think. And love your neighbor as yourself. And that really sums up the 10 Commandments. But I still have to consider the 10 Commandments. And the first one, I think, is thou shalt have no other gods before me. And the challenge I had with getting involved in any Christian church was that anytime I went to their statement of beliefs, the first thing was that the Bible was inerrant, infallible, and perfect. And I'd taken some courses on the Bible, and I started going to a Christian school when I was in 6th grade and became rather fond of it, used it as the guiding source of my life for a good number of years, which relieved my parents of a lot of suffering from a wayward teenager. But I made up for that in my 20s and 30s, but still, they had it pretty easy going because I was a Jesus freak. And I resonated with that. Even in my 20s, I had a bumper sticker that said, real men love Jesus, But as I got into my 20s, I realized that the Bible thing wasn't really working for me. And years later, I look at how it was constructed from the time in 362 when, what's his name? It's in my book somewhere. So these are the books that should be considered canonical. And 2 centuries later, the Pope said, yep, this is it. This is what God said. We've all agreed on it after many discussions. And here you go. This is it. It's the only way you can get God. It was constructed in the Old Testament and the New Testament. And the Old Testament was delivered to us through the nation of Israel. And right there, it's a nation. So it is a government thing. And I have met some wonderful Jewish people and taken part in some amazing Jewish traditions. But I look at the nation of Israel, and they've been at war for the entirety of their existence. And I recognize that by the time they were able to convince the world that they were the chosen people, they had slaughtered a great many of them. And I don't resonate with the idea of saying this is the end-all be-all that God wants me to know, adding to it the New Testament, which contains only 4 actual books on the Jesus seller it's supposed to be all about, and many more from some dude named Paul, who was the coat check boy at the martyrdom of Stephen, which I do take a little personal offense to. And so when that book was then added to the Jewish book, and the Holy Roman Catholic Church was the first corporation developed out of the Roman Empire, the longest lasting we have in the world right now. When it was decided that these would be the holy books by this group of men, I think we altered the way that we think. And I personally, considering the fact that they really had to go through like 7 different crusades and inquisitions to subjugate people through torture and violence and fear into believing these little facts, even when there was a revolution of Protestants who protested a lot of the things they were doing, it still held very dearly to the fundamental belief that the book is more important than God. And even now, when you go to the statement of beliefs of most churches, you'll find the first thing they believe in is their book, then God, then down the line, Jesus and the Holy Spirit. For me, I'm still not a huge believer in the Trinity, because I see 4 parts to us in the mirror of God. But it's still, those priorities just don't work for me. I don't have enough reverence for the nation of Israel or their chosen books to limit God to that, especially when I have seen the Spirit of Christ in so many other people beyond just Christians. And actually, sometimes it's really hard to find the Spirit of Christ in Christians. But I've seen it, sometimes even in myself, when I allow it to happen. And when I let go of my fears and I step into the world with faith that I'll continue to be provided for and shown new things, meet new people, and recognize every 1,440 minutes I get each day gives me another opportunity, or 1,440 of them, to recreate my perspective on life and my ability to work in it and what I'm working for. And so for me, as a man of faith, who's willing to just step out and say, life, God, whatever you are, I am that I am, keep providing for me. And not needing the Holy Roman Catholic Church, nor any of its subsidiaries, to sign off on that. And say, I will have this personal relationship as an emissary of Christ in whatever way I can be, but I will cultivate this personal relationship with the energy. Though I can't describe it, and it remains largely a mystery, it's the energy that gives me every breath I've ever breathed, every sound I've ever heard, everything I've ever seen, every relationship I've ever had the pleasure to cultivate. Beyond anything that I or any of those organizations can limit God to, I get to have a personal relationship with that. And that's sacred to me, in a way that I know a lot of religious folk can't really wrap their heads around, because I don't pledge allegiance to the same things they still do. And I recognize their right to believe whatever they want to believe, and I hope that they can recognize my right to not, because I'm sorry, I just can't. I've looked too deeply to the periphery and seen what goes beyond the edge, that I can't just give myself over to the limitations that other men have seen. When I moved to the house on Whitaker Bayou, I found the passage back to where it goes into the deep woods. And I was telling my housemate about it. He didn't believe me. He thought that, no, it ended, and this is as far as you can go. And as I led the way, he followed behind me. I went further than he thought it could go. And I introduced him to this new world, which he now gets to kayak whenever he wants to, should he choose to do so. And that's kind of where I feel with Christianity. I don't want to pay attribute to the organization of it any more than I want to pay attribute to the federal government and all this Democrat versus Republican nonsense that we've been dealing with for so freaking long. I listened to the words of Will Rogers from 100 years ago, and I see them as prophetic. And let's throw some new stones in the river, tell some new stories, create some new things. So that's what I'm trying to do with my moments out here. And I'm very appreciative of them. In all the places that I've been able to visit. See ya.